So I'm going to be going over my inquiry question, which is what is heritage language? And let me hide this. What is heritage language and how does it appear in our literacy learners? So, let's see. Heritage language and more. Heritage language is a language that is differently spoken from the dominant language in a person's mainstream society. So, for instance, Houghton, the language that is spoken is English, and the language that is differently spoken is the language I speak, which is Spanish. It is a language that is readily available, naturally acquired. So, readily available means that I'm able to access it whenever I want through my family or like my home kind of stream kind of thing. So it is something that is naturally acquired, and not learned. So if you remember that when we learned about acquisition and learning, yeah. So it's something you're surrounded by and you pick up on. It can be sequential to bilingual, so like it can lead to you being bilingual if you are a heritage language speaker. However, sometimes it is also simultaneous to being bilingual. So a lot of times there are people who speak two languages, but one is more of a heritage language because they didn't really learn those literacy elements that come with learning a language. And so it's really the development of here, the morphosyntactic lexical and those phonological systems within a language. The comprehension production is something that varies and can be different among all heritage language speakers. An important part and aspect is that it's familial and the cultural ties, and it has strong cultural ties versus just the language you pick up, like a second language or your native language, which is the language you initially have. The differences here, if you want to pause this and take a look at what the differences are, please feel free to do that. However, I just want to say one thing. Heritage language is not typically your first language, and it is not the dominant societal language where native language can be and sometimes is. And the main difference between second language, native language, and heritage language sometimes has literacy and grammar skills, where native and second language do have literacy and grammar skills that depend more on education rather than acquisition through like family. So now I want to talk about the social positioning of heritage language. So there are two positions that a person puts themselves in, and that's the self and the other. The self is connections and ties to heritage, and the other are linguistic communities. So heritage community versus linguistic community. And the four models that are talked about are home-based and visitor-based models. So home-based is the culture that someone is more comfortable operating. So for instance, I'm comfortable operating English. The visitor language is the culture that they frequently visit but feel less comfortable operating. So if I felt less comfortable operating Spanish, that's my visitor language. It's not a language that I feel comfortable always talking in. And so then we have life on the border model, which is being on the edge of cultures, essentially creating a border culture. So this is like languages like Spanglish and communities who speak Spanglish. So in Puerto Rico, they essentially created this kind of border culture because they're not so comfortable speaking English, they're not so comfortable speaking Spanish. So they merged the two, and then you have life on the border. The next model that I want to talk about is this model down here, which is feet in both worlds model. And this is when you're balanced both cultures evenly. So this is like if a student goes home and they speak Spanish, they feel comfortable speaking Spanish at home and in their community. And when they go to school, they feel comfortable speaking English in their community as well. So then we have the shifting identity gears model. And that one is a lot differently because it is more when the context of linguistics and culture is in the area. So if I'm talking English and my mother calls me and I pick up and she starts talking to me in Spanish and I respond back to her in Spanish, while still be able to, when I hang up, talk to my people who are speaking English with me. That is going to be more what the shifting identity gears looks like. So there is a language continuum, and I'll let you know where I fall so you have an idea of what it means. If you really want to dig deeper, in the link of the presentation is more information on that. But I fall right here. So because I have some acquisition, because I had some learning in the formal literacy, grammar, like those kinds of things of a second language, um, through like my academics and not through family, because heritage language is a language you learn through family and heritage ties. I fall right here, right in between this heritage and second language. So some people can fall more on the native language of heritage language being more of something they came up with a lot, versus some people like me have been helped with academia to um, move further into language. So education, heritage language, and how it looks in our students. So specifically, I want to talk about language shyness. So language shyness is when a student is less likely to interact with their heritage language because of the imperfections that salient proficient speakers have corrected, and so that feeling is ridiculing, which then leads to like the idea of the consequences of shyness. Because language is such a huge cultural identity marker, the consequences are sometimes really extreme, where students will give up on their heritage language, they become disinterested in their ethnic emergence, and because of this they don't really find a place where they fit or identify in, and so this becomes a negative self-image. So you'll probably see this sometimes as, I'm too Hispanic for the Americans and too American for the Hispanics. So to help students overcome shyness, I hope that I will be able to persuade my more proficient heritage language speakers not to ridicule the students uh, who do speak like who are not as comfortable in heritage language as they are. So saying things like, well, at least you know more than I do, that kind of thing, to ease that like discomfort. Also encourage reading to form better comprehension, to create opportunities for heritage language speakers of all continuums to be introduced to other familiar heritage language speakers. So look at celebrities, look at role models, and maybe even bring in a friend that you know who is a heritage language speaker. Next, I want to talk about some differentiation for heritage language speakers. And one of the things is a digital comprehension assessment to know where your students fall on the continuum. So you can make a map using this test to put on the board for students to place themselves. And this even works for monolinguistic students, so that then everyone gets an idea of where they fall, because if you're monolinguistic, that's your native language. And so this helps with language shyness because it allows everyone to be visible and be seen, and also show where each of them are. It could also, it depends on the student and how they are. Also, you want to offer a wide range of level books in their heritage language. Even encourage them to do assignments based on this. Write a workshop, perfect opportunity to introducing those leveled books. So then you want to learn about your students, and here are some questions. You can pause this and learn about what those questions are. But basically the goal is to learn about the student. When did they acquire the language? Who in their life is influencing them in that language? So what is heritage language and how does it appear in our literacy learners? So heritage language is a minority language, not to be confused with marginalized. Minority just means smaller language in a community that someone speaks, that is typically learned in and through home culture. It appears in various ways to students, and it is important to know and learn about because it helps to cultivate learning spaces that allow for student exploration and builds on your students' funds and knowledge. So the questions that we saw back there are like really hit that target. So yeah, that is what language acquisition is. And yeah. How do I stop video?